People who have experienced paranormal activity. What is your story? My mom was staying at a B&B in Newfoundland, and when she turned off the lights to go to sleep, she heard a lady gently whisper hello in her ear. She also had this sensation of someone being in her room. The next morning at breakfast, she mentioned her experience to the B&B host, who casually confirmed that it's just Sally and mentioned that other people have seen her ghost. I grew up in a house that originally served as an old folks home. At night the whole house would pop and crack. It sounded like people were walking up and down the stairs all night. My mom was always on board that the house was haunted. My dad said it was just the house settling. The house in 1984 was 100 years old. One night I woke up to the sound of a door slamming. I walked down the hall and peeked around the corner, looking down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a closet. The door was open about 6 to 8 inches, and there was a human face looking at me from inside the closet. I ran into the bathroom and tried to calm down. Finally I mustered the courage to come out of the bathroom and look down the stairs again. Nothing there. There were many experiences in that house that are harder to explain. There's a Japanese ghost legend about a female spirit who watches people from cracks in closet doors, etc. Maybe she went on holiday to your place? A nice closet Airbnb? When I was younger, maybe like 5, I went to bed and I woke up to the sound of something whispering, and I thought nothing of it until I heard hey, PSST, and I looked up and saw a black dog with yellow eyes standing on 2 legs. I started screaming and crying and yelled for my parents, and when they came up the thing hid behind a chair in my room. I was so scared I slept with my parents for a week and never saw that thing again. I had multiple dreams about it though. It always had this power that it could make me freeze and not be able to move, and he would always do it in front of my parents and they never did anything. Really creepy shit. I was about 16 and home alone one night at my stepdad's house. Everyone had gone out for the night except me. One thing you need to know about this household: it's in a pretty rural area, in a little village where everyone knows each other and a lot of family lives in the same town. Because of this, no one would ever use the front door. Everyone who came over would just come through the garden and use the back door and walk right in. So it's about 10 p.m. I'm watching TV, and the doorbell rings. It startled me a bit. Who could that be at this hour? So I look out the window to get a full view of the front doorstep. No one's there. As I'm looking out, the bell rings again, but there's no one there to ring it. My whole body becomes red hot with adrenaline and fear, and I'm frozen to my seat as it rings again and again. I run to grab my phone to try and call my mom to come home cause I'm scared shitless. No answer. The ringing stops. About an hour later my parents come home and I freak out and tell them what happened, and I'm pissed at them for not answering the phone. My stepdad chuckles and says, "Oh yeah, that's my wife. It happens sometimes." His previous wife and partner for years and years had died a few years back. He said he tried to have the doorbell fixed only to figure out there's nothing wrong with it. Their theory is that when the doorbell rings it's her, reminding them she's still with them. I posted this story before in an old long post, so I'm just going to copy and paste since I don't have time to type everything else out. On mobile, I lived in a haunted house for a year. At this time it was just me and my 3 sisters, ages 13, 5 and 2, I was 10. My older sister and I were home from school with a stomach bug. My mom had to go get my 5-year-old sister from school and asked us to watch our youngest sister. We were sitting in the living room and she was eating some snacks and had a sippy cup of water. The top to the cup must have not been screwed on tight enough because when she knocked it over, water spilled everywhere. My older sister went to the kitchen to get some napkins to clean it up. When she came back she handed me some of the napkins and we both started cleaning. We were on our hands and knees wiping up the water when we started to hear banging coming from the 2nd floor. We both paused, looked at each other and said nothing, but we both had that look of "you heard that too, right?" We stayed silent and kept cleaning. Then again, another bang. At this point we stand up and are still silent, just staring at the ceiling. Then came the giggles. We heard little kids upstairs laughing. Then the laughing turned to singing. It sounded like children choir singing. My sister scooped up the baby and we ran outside. It was a clear day out that day, but I remember once we got outside it started to rain. We had no choice but to go back inside. We stayed on the front porch until my mom got home. We saw things in that house that I still have nightmares about, 20 years later, but for some reason that giggling and singing bothered me the most. When I originally posted the entire story I had no idea how to use Reddit, so the original post is like a sloppy novel. It did however get the attention of some TV producers, and I was able to tell my story on a show about paranormal experiences as children. It was weird, but kinda neat. This isn't much compared to other stories in the thread, but the apartment where I'm currently living seems to have some sort of resident shadow figure. I tend to see it moving in my office. Sometimes when I'm out in the hallway I'll see a shadow that looks like a medium-build man moving in my office. And sometimes when I'm in the office at my PC I'll see it out of the corner of my eye, like someone standing at my shoulder, and turn expecting to see my boyfriend, but nobody is there, or down where the stairs meet the front door. The closet near the front entrance, right by where I've seen the shadow lingering at the end of the stairs, has opened itself a few times when I've been home alone and cooking in the adjacent kitchen. It's never seemed frightening to me, though. So whatever it is, some trick of lighting or bona fide shadow dude, I don't really worry about it much. I did recently have a bad bout of COVID, and there was one night that I was running a temp of 103 and was just absolutely miserable, falling in and out of sleep while being anxious about my rising temp and how labored/difficult my breathing was becoming. I was kind of scared since my aunt had died in her sleep due to COVID relatively early on in the pandemic. She had been on the phone with her boyfriend and mentioned she wasn't feeling well suddenly and was going to take a nap, and I couldn't help but think of her because of how quickly it seemed like things were accelerating that night. At one point I did manage to fall asleep, but was woken up by a shadow figure opening my door and coming to stand over me. It wasn't my boyfriend. I was staying completely isolated in a diff part of the apartment to protect him since he has asthma and is high risk. I asked later to confirm he hadn't randomly decided to break that quarantine that night, and he was like OFC not, but I couldn't see anything but a shadowy outline. The figure was saying something to me, but it was unintelligible, but seemed like a question. Then it eventually walked back out of the room. I would have assumed it was a fever hallucination if my cat didn't jump up from her sleeping position to stare at the figure. Who knows? Maybe it still was and I even hallucinated her reaction? But I kind of like the idea that my shadow roommate came to check on me at my sickest point, when I was anxious about being alone, since my boyfriend couldn't. I'd if I was just tripping because I was tired or what. But last year when I moved out into a place of my own and it was just me at the time, I remember laying down to sleep and getting the chills, which doesn't happen too much in Arizona summer. But I heard the most clearest voice say something and it sounded like someone had leaned into my ear. I shot up and saw no one and forced myself back asleep. It happened one other time a couple days after, but nothing since. I've always slept with my bedroom door open, right? I have a small room and it feels smaller when the door's closed. Also, I was very scared of the dark as a kid. Anyways, so there was one night I woke up in the middle of the night for no reason, and I had a mirror across my room that faced the hallway. My bed was facing the mirror, so I could see the hallway from my bed. And that night I looked in the mirror and I saw my mom in the mirror, and she was looking down and giving me the creepiest smile. I blinked and she was gone. I'm not sure if that was a sleep-deprived hallucination or what, but it definitely wasn't my mom. Sorry, I'm bad at explaining. When I was a kid I also saw my younger sister in the mirror. Middle of the day. Was playing outside, then went to the restroom. Saw her in the reflection of the body-length mirror naked on the toilet and staring at me. Total eye contact. The restroom was divided in 2 rooms, so the mirror helped me see who was on the toilet before I went further in. Anyway, went into the restroom to tell her off. I was a brat and saw that I was completely alone. No sister on toilet. I used the toilet and booked it after I was done. Ran into her outside and she was fully clothed. She said she wasn't in the bathroom, then ran away crying when I told her what I saw. And thinking back on it, I heard a similar story from a neighbor who also saw someone in the mirror in her bathroom. It was an apartment complex, so same building. I have no idea who she saw though. Said she saw a woman. I wonder if the people living there today has experienced anything. I used to babysit my niece and nephew when they were 4 and 5 while my sister went to work. She lived down the street from me, so I would walk down in the morning before she left and before the kids woke up. I got there one morning and after she left I laid down on the couch. I heard one of the kids run down the hall and I immediately pretended to be asleep so they would go back to bed and not get the day started yet. I felt my niece run by me on the couch. Her running stomps shook the floor and I could hear the trinkets on the shelves shake. And I felt the wind of her blow by me. Then it was quiet, but I knew she was still there. She leaned over my ear and moved my hair out of the way and laughed in my ear. And I just thought the audacity of this girl. And then she hid under the end table of the couch. Realizing she wasn't gonna go back to bed until I woke up, I just got up and looked under the end table. There was no one there. Completely baffled at how she got up and out of the living room in literally 2 seconds without me hearing shook me. So I went down the hall to her room and was starting to freak out. My nephew was sound asleep in his bedroom and I got to my niece's room. She was sound asleep tucked under her covers. My heart almost fell out of my body. Not my story, but my uncle and his family. When my cousins were born they bought them toys and one of them was like a teddy ruxpin. But it was a dog. Anyway, one night it kept going off for no reason. Eventually, my uncle got fed up and took its batteries out. Not even a few minutes later it starts going off again. Unsurprisingly, that thing was in the trash by the next day. This sounds silly, but I still stand by it almost 2 decades later. In the space between my bed and nightstand, I saw a blinking eye just kind of looking off. It never looked at me. Of course, when I would bolt out of my room to get my parents, it would disappear. I didn't even step foot into my bedroom for 8 months straight. Also, once my mom was walking down the hall and got hit by the bathroom door that swung open on its own. I could hear her yelling, "What the hell?" etc. And then the smoke alarm started going nuts. We started to ask it questions and beep once for yes, twice for no. It cooperated with us for a short time and then stopped. The night my daughter was born, it was a home birth. I was laying out a shower curtain and getting the bed ready while she was in the bath. I was a nervous wreck as this was my first child and the whole home birth thing. Something whispered directly in my ear, "Don't worry, we're all here." The feeling that went through me was like a shot of Dilaudid. In a second, a wave of love, calm and joy washed over my body. One of the oddest experiences I've ever had. Edit, I had the same experience just a few months ago under different circumstances. My grandpa died in '02, and I've never dreamed about him since. Well, I had a dream that he came up to me with a beaming smile, looking like he was 20 years old and full of health. He had a full head of hair, he was bald IRL, and he was taller than me. IRL he was very small, 5'4". I don't remember what he said, but he hugged me and I woke up and I got that feeling again. I don't know what heroin is like, but that's how I imagine it. Just peace, love and warmth flowing through my whole body. Physically the best sensation I've ever felt. Edit 2, another weird thing. The night my daughter was born I took a lot of pictures. Anyone with an iPhone knows you can see the pictures on a map of Earth, where they were taken. As soon as she was born, still covered in blood, I took a series of 11 pictures. On that map, all the pictures from that night show up at my house in the US. Except for those 11, the map places them in some remote forest valley in Kazakhstan. Still can't figure that one out. Years ago, when I was just a kid, my mom and I lived in this old apartment in MA. One day, when I was watching TV while she was cooking, all of a sudden she started to scream, yelling for me to come over and look at this. I ran over. She was standing right by the dining room table, which was empty except for a blue plastic cup at the end of it. I was confused, and asked her what the hell was going on. She didn't say anything. She just picked up the blue cup, and set it down at the other end of the table. As soon as she put it down, the cup just slid over all the way to the other end of the table. By itself. It stopped right at the edge. I jumped back, perplexed. My mom picked up the cup and did it again. And again for a third time. I've always liked technology and science. I grew up to become an engineer, so rather than being scared, I tried to figure out a rational explanation for this. I picked up the cup, and looked at it closely. I looked under and around the table. The table was spotless, and there was nothing else there. It wasn't a trick. There were no wires or magnets or anything of the sort. I tried the same thing with other objects, and nothing happened. It only happened with this particular blue plastic cup. I eventually tried it while looking directly at the cup, literally 2 inches away from it, and followed its path. The cup would actually vibrate as it moved, and did so in such a way that you could only notice it up close. To this day, I am not sure what caused the cup to move. That wasn't the only strange thing I experienced in that apartment. I used to work in the Winchester Mystery House. For those that don't know, it's a mansion built by the heiress to the Winchester Rifle Company. She built the mansion with confusing rooms, doors and stairways that lead to nowhere, so she could confuse the ghosts of those killed by the Winchester rifle. There had been random ghost sightings by employees throughout the years, and it was listed as an official haunted house. I worked in the office and answered phones, which happened to be one of the 160 rooms of the mansion. One of my jobs was to inform the tour station when the last tour exited, because my office was near the end of the tour and I could hear the footsteps of the tour. Well, one day around 6 p.m., as I'm closing up, I hear footsteps in the house and inform the tour station that the last tour was about to exit. They told me that the last tour left the house about an hour earlier. So, my first thought was that it was my manager on patrol. When he came back into the office, I asked him if he was in the house and he said no. He was in the gift shop. He informed me that he closed it up and absolutely no one was in the house. As he was saying that, we continued to hear footsteps in the house above us. We looked at each other with that look you give someone when you don't know what the fuck is going on. He and 2 other people went into the house to look for the source of the footsteps, thinking it was a guest who had gotten lost. They walked into the exact same room where I was hearing footsteps and saw that there was no one there. When they came back into the office, we just sat in our chairs until 8 p.m., listening for footsteps as they were wandering around the house. None of us really acknowledged what we were hearing because we wanted to believe it was just the house creaking. However, these sounds sounded nothing like creaking as they were well defined with the cadence of footsteps. I'll never quite know what it was that was above us that day. Perhaps there was a logical explanation. Let's just say, I didn't sleep well for about a month after that event. When I was 6 years old, I went to a restaurant with my dad and grandparents. Walking into the restaurant, there was a small room to the right full of arcade machines. I can't remember if other kids were there. When we got to the table, I kept begging my dad to let me go to the arcade. He pointed to the gambling machines at the bar and said those are just for adults. I kept telling him that's not what I was talking about, but he wouldn't let me go. When we finished and started walking out of the restaurant, I turned to the arcade to point it out. There was nothing there but a wall. After reading these, one thing is evident in having nightmares for a month. Not sure if it's paranormal, but when my daughter was 2 years old, she was looking up at the moon one night and I asked her what she was thinking, expecting her to say something cute like, "Is the moon made of cheese, Daddy?" Instead, she looks me in the eye and says, "We are all in the same cage." Scared the crap out of me. Not proud to say that I basically ran away. How the hell could a 2-year-old come up with that? Years later, I heard this same sentence again, this time from Jack Nicholson. It's his first line in the movie Easy Rider. He says it to Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper in jail. And no, She hadn't seen Easy Rider at age 2 smile. When we were young teenagers we were all hanging out at a neighborhood friend's house when he decided it would be fun to pull out a Ouija board. We were all just stupid kids, ridiculously high at the time, so we really had no idea what we were doing with the board. We were sitting around the board in the living room, just being dumb, asking silly questions about ghosts, spirits, dead relatives, etc. Suddenly, this guy's dog, who is a big, old, morbidly fat mutt, jumps up, runs into the dining room and starts snarling and barking ferociously at the light fixture hanging above the dining room table. There was nothing there. There was no upstairs in this house. This normally sedentary pig dog is just totally freaking out at a light fixture hanging from the ceiling. He then lets out a spine-tingling yelp, like someone kicked him hard, and he spins around and runs out of the room yelping the whole way through his exit. The group of us just sat there, with our mouths hanging open, wondering what the hell we just saw. When reality crept back in, we whipped that board across the room, and bolted out of that house like it was on fire. It was honestly like something out of a movie, only this really happened. We all concurred later that this was not something we'd hallucinated due to the excessive bud we'd inhaled earlier. Used to be a contractor, had to inspect all kinds of places. One was the old psych hospital known as Redacted Asylum that had long been empty. Was working on one of the floors and it was starting to feel off. It was August but got freezing inside. All of a sudden, decided I was going to calmly but briskly leave the building. As I was going down the stairs, I think I was between the second and third floor, something grabbed my ankle. I booked it out of there immediately, didn't care if someone saw me terrified or panicked. Ran the fuck out of there, ripped off my PPE, called my contact to confirm I was out and left for the day due to outstanding reports. Went home and tried to convince myself it didn't happen. Buddy of mine lived in a really old building, built in the early 1800s I believe, in a really old small town in Texas. His apartment was upstairs, businesses were downstairs. Whole building was originally a small factory of some sort that had been remodeled for more modern purposes. There were some obvious this wasn't originally an apartment features, like a small door in his closet that seemed to lead to strange empty space between the walls, with no real reason for existing. Even when the door would randomly blow itself open with freezing cold air, you could sort of write that off as being due to remodels of old buildings, and not all the kinks of ventilation and stuff being quite worked out. That's kind of the explanation he gave to the strange noises he would hear coming out of there too. Also, windows would always be open. Not windows he or his GF had opened, just random windows around the apartment. He would always close them, and then later find them open again. Seems like faulty latches that just come open over time, and not a huge deal. Then he stayed home from work one day, and he heard the window unlatch. Not only did he hear that one latch fall open, but a second later he heard the window unlatch, then another, one after the other, in order as if someone was walking through the living room unlatching windows as they went. Then all at once, each of the windows fell open. So he noped the fuck out of there for the day and came back that weekend to investigate. Things seemed fine. Nothing weird happened for a while. Then about a month later his GF experienced the same thing when she was there by herself. After a while they got used to it. Just weird windows. Then the final nail in the coffin for that place was when they got a dog. The dog was a puppy, so was inherently happy, playful, always running around doing puppy stuff. Except when the door in the closet blew open, or the windows unlatched, then the dog would stand completely still, focus its eyes on something that nobody else in the room could seem to see. And the dog's eyes would slowly track around the room, as if it was watching someone or something moving through the room. Nobody could ever figure out what the dog was looking at, and it only did this right after some other ghost stuff started happening. They moved out after this happened a few times.